Hello, everyone, and welcome to Being Naked. My name is Venus Castleberg, your host, and I am so grateful to be here with you today. I'm very touched today to have this wonderful guest, Mary Case, who came. She's a CF of Access Consciousness, a certified facilitator, and and she shared this beautiful story, and I was just really inspired by what she was choosing in the world and what she was creating in the world, by who she was being. And so I'm really excited to have her on today. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And it was interesting because I shared the story and then right away Venus was like, Mary, can we connect? There was something truly magical about the story.
Yes, absolutely. So for anyone watching, let's go ahead and just a little bit of back history on kind of setting ourselves up to the miracle. So what happened 4 years ago? How did it all start?
Well, this young woman that I've been working with has been, if they were to give her a label, it would be nonverbal autistic. In fact, they would also say like catatonic, meaning that she's not responding basically for the last 4 years, other than to, physically take care of herself, what was required. She doesn't leave her room. She will go out by herself maybe and watch a movie, but mostly she's in her room and never engaging with people other than a little bit with her mom. So I met her mom a number of years ago through a class that I was teaching. And I said, hey, I would really like to meet this young woman. And mom said, sure, please come. And I knew she was in her room and hadn't left the room. And I just opened the door and I went in and I just sat beside her and was really present with her. I didn't make eye contact. I sat on the other side of the bed beside her and I just sat there. And what started to open up was this conversation, and this may sound really strange to people listening, but it was a conversation, but it was nonverbal. I was like, wow, this is really strange. So she and I were actually talking, engaging somehow, not in a tangible way, but there was some kind of communication going on there. And so I was intrigued and said to mom, I'd like to come back. So I started to visit her once a week or so, and it was always the same scenario. I just kind of went into her room and I just sat beside her. And really, I didn't expect anything. Didn't expect her to speak, didn't expect her to engage. I am a musician, so I started to take my instruments with me. So I would play my violin for her. And she, at that point, always her eyes were covered, or her ears. Usually her ears, actually. So she would always put her hands over her ears whenever I was there, as kind of like a little bit of shutting out. Every once in a while, the hand would drop just a wee bit if I was playing the violin. So I started taking the violin, and then I took the cello, and then took the viola. And then they found out about this through her, like the caseworkers, the people that manage her case, gave some funding so that she could have like officially music lessons. So once a week I would go there and I would play for her.
Mm-hmm.
And this continued for a while, and there started to be some intrigue with like what kind of is going on, like what is she doing, because there were other caseworkers and it just wasn't going well. She wasn't allowing them to engage. Sometimes she was physically violent with her mom. There was a lot of stuff going on. So there was some intrigue about like, who is this Mary Case? What is she doing? Right? You can't explain it, right? And so they would come and they would say, can we watch what you're doing? And I'm not certified. I'm not trained to work with autistic children, young adults. My training is 37 years as an elementary school music teacher, which apparently is all the training you require. Plus what I learned in my XMen work with Access Consciousness. So they started to come and we'd open the door just a crack and they'd watch because they wanted to know, like, what is Mary doing? And really, how can you explain it's not a doing, it's a being?
Right.
Being completely present with no point of view, no judgment, total allowance. I had no point of view if she ever left the room. I had no agenda. I just went down and I just sat beside her and sat beside her and sometimes did music. So there was an intrigue there, and she did have a little bit of funding, and one of the like chief psychiatrists came to see what I was doing. And it was quite intriguing. This young woman actually allowed me to bring in the caseworker and the psychiatrist into the room, and he was observing very clinically, which was actually really interesting for me. Like, he was able to track her eye movement under the lids, for example, because she still had like the eyes closed mostly and her ears covered. And so they could not really explain what I was doing. However, the psychiatrist says, put her on the case.
Mm.
She requires to be on the case. So they essentially had to come up with a name for me, because you're not allowed to be a therapist. Like, I'm not allowed to do therapy.
Right.
I'm not allowed to do treatments. So I was brought on as a consultant and also as a doing music with her, music lessons. So that was like about 3 years ago. And I've been 3 years now visiting her 3 or 4 times a week and doing some music and just sitting with her and being totally present, no point of view, total allowance. And Mom and I observed that behaviors were slowly changing. Fewer seizures and less violent behavior outbursts, just general calming, much calmer state as the years evolved. Yeah, that was kind of how things progressed through the 4 years.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
slowly the hands would drop away from her ears, so she would be there and not, require. We talk about being naked, so it's almost like she's willingness to drop her barriers, slowly drop her barriers, and show up a little bit more as she felt safe and secure in doing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, what a beautiful space that you obviously hold for her. And and I really just want to acknowledge you for the time that you were willing to, a lot of people do go with an agenda, and this has to happen with a certain amount of time. And if there's, but for you to just be willing to be there with her and without your walls and barriers, and let her be her.
Yeah.
I'm just that's just a beautiful space. So thank you for being that person that was willing to spend that time with her.
Oh,
And
you're so welcome.
I hear that there was actually a miracle that occurred, or a couple of miracles that occurred, after 4 years of spending time with her. Would you share those with us?
I sure will. It was, and this was what I was sharing in the certified facilitators thread, because it was like such a miracle. We all cried, and Mom has been a big part of this as well. Mom is a miracle in creating this and creating the space for me to be there, also to be this space of total allowance. Like, if you can imagine, for your daughter having no point of view, that it was okay for her to be in her room for four years. And you still cook her meals. She did come out of the room to eat her meals or go to the bathroom, but never any engagement. So Mom was such a gift as well. And Mom, like myself, can communicate non-verbally. And she was getting this image of purple Converse shoes. So Mom went and bought purple Converse shoes for her daughter's birthday. And the miracle was that one day, Serena, I know I can use her name here, was standing at the door with her purple Converse shoes.
Mhm.
The door to go outside of her apartment is going, what do I do? And I was like, what do I do? Okay, let's put these shoes on. And I was like, do you want to go out? Like, I still talk to her with my voice as well. I said, okay, ice cream? Does ice cream work for you? And I was like, wow, what's going on here? And Mom was like, what's going on here? And it was like so absolutely incredible. So we put the purple Converse shoes on, and Mom was amazing. She put a little bit of makeup on her daughter, because when she was younger, she used to really like wearing makeup. And Serena was not always in her room. She had some life events unfold, which kind of also led to her being there. and hadn't surfaced from those in the 4 years. And so we put on those purple Converse shoes and we left the building. I had my car there, and she got in the car. And I was like, wow, this is, and we're crying, right? We're crying.
Right, of
And
course.
and I was getting ice cream. So we went to a local ice cream place, Dairy Queen, and we went in there. And then Mom was getting like Blizzard. She used to like Blizzard, so we got a Blizzard, which is a kind of ice cream. And then we sat down and we ate the ice cream.
Wow.
And it was such a miracle, truly, because it had been 4 years of having no point of view, no agenda. I had a knowing that this moment was going to come. I did have a knowing, but I didn't have any agenda or point of view of when that would be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, and somebody just asked how many parents communicate non-verbally and have never acknowledged this capacity. It's true. It really is truly a capacity. And thank you, whoever wrote that question, because I really wanted to ask more about that too. Mary, could you maybe, because somebody is probably listening going, nonverbal communication, what is that? Would you share a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. And I talk a lot about this in some of the classes that I teach. And it's really the art of nonverbal communication. So we all communicate nonverbally, even though we're not necessarily aware of it.
Mhm.
I give the analogy of like the teacher stare, like, or the mom stare, like, when you're in trouble, right? They don't have to say anything. Or your partner arrives home from work and they've had a bad day.
Mhm.
We all communicate to a degree non-verbally, but we're not always aware of it. So when you start to kind of tap into that, you'll start to see that we do get messages. Energy is actually our first language. And, babies are nonverbal communication often.
Mhm.
Or your children, what your children require without actually having to speak the words. So that is actually something that we're capable of, but we're not necessarily choosing or kind of tapped into.
Mhm.
So, and when I say nonverbal communication, like sometimes for me, like I get actual words, but it can be like an image or a sense, like you just sense something, like ice cream. It's not that I saw a picture of an ice cream cone. It's just like, I just had this sense or feeling that ice cream was what she desired.
That's wonderful. And would, if somebody sees it or feels it or senses it or hears it, there's not a right and a wrong way for nonverbal communication. I'm getting, yeah,
Yeah.
right. So it's just like we're just aware, and however you receive the awareness is what works for you. But just acknowledging that we are all doing it all the time. And I've heard Gary Douglas and Dane here say that, for us, all of us, energy was our first language, not
Yes.
words, so we were already, as babies, we were already communicating energetically. And it didn't have to be I want this.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. And what you're grabbing there is that it's actually an evolution. So my point of view about like this autistic young adult was she's actually like highly evolved. She does not require words to communicate,
Right.
So that is actually an evolution. It's not like there's nothing broken, there's nothing wrong. It's just like that's the way she's choosing right now to show up in the world.
Mm.
So this art of nonverbal communication is actually very sophisticated. And perhaps we will get to a point where words are not required.
Mm. And thank you for that, Mary. And you also mentioned that you are an XMen facilitator. Is that
That's
true?
right.
Yes. Yes. I've been in Access Conscious for 9 years, 10 years, long time. But I just fairly recently took my first XMen class. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And it's not just for people that are labeled or diagnosed as autistic or ADD. Would you, maybe somebody's out there going, "What's X-Men?" Would you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, basically X-Men is different. I mean, we are all on the spectrum somewhere. Like we say ADHD, OCD, autism spectrum, autism, like all of that, which we call a spectrum. We're all kind of there somewhere, or especially if you landed on this call and you're listening to it, you're probably on that spectrum somewhere. Originally, Access Consciousness said, okay, we're going to call these XMen, because in the Marvel comics, the XMen made themselves wrong. They judged themselves. They wanted to hide. They didn't want to come out of the phone booth. They just desired to have a normal life, which was impossible, which is basically the story of us as XMen, right? So that's where the term XMen came from. So it is all of that and much more.
Awesome. And so how would you recommend somebody like to get that they are an X-Men?
You know, it really just starts by looking at everywhere you've made yourself wrong. And if everywhere you made yourself wrong was actually a strength, something strong, then you could start to see that you are actually an X-Men. And it took me many years. I was at a much more advanced X-Men class, and Gary Douglas said to me, like, when are you going to get that you're an X-Men? I was going, what, me? I was taking the course because I wanted to be a better school teacher, right? I taught for 37 years in the school systems. And that's the only reason, professional development, I want to be a good school teacher, right? And then he was like, are you not getting this? And as soon as I acknowledged that I was an X-Men, I looked at my life and I thought, you know, I have to be ADHD. I have 240 students in front of me in a large orchestra, and I'm conducting the orchestra, and I'm aware of all those kids simultaneously.
Right. Yeah, that's a capacity. That's for sure.
Okay, apparently that's a capacity, right?
Yep.
So we just don't see it, right? And it's really interesting when we just acknowledge that we are. And then we start to see things show up. And it's like 90% what we start to see is our brilliance as
Instead
X-Men.
of our wrongness.
Yeah.
Wow. What a gift that is. So tell me, how have things been with your friend and since the ice cream outing?
Well, now it's quite amusing because I have to make sure I have enough time every time I visit. So before my visits were very short, and now I need to know that Serena and her purple shoes are waiting at the door. And we've been to the park, we've been for ice cream, we've been to a restaurant for dinner, and she has a program where she can get funding, and we're looking at a horseback riding program that's available. So it's like every day is unfolding as a miracle.
Oh, wow, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, again, Mary, I'm so grateful for you to know you're in the world and to know that there are people willing to take that time. And what just amazing miracles. And so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'm really touched by your level of receiving of the miracle. You know, like we are all walking, talking miracles. This is one story, but we are walking, talking miracles. And we are X-Men extraordinaire. Some know it as a neurodivergent thinkers. If you're not familiar with that term from Access Consciousness, neurodivergent thinkers, essentially. And I won't say we all are, but most of us are there somewhere.
And if you're watching, like she said, if you're watching this or listening, you probably are. So,
Yeah.
Well, Mary, this is truly wonderful. Do you have some classes coming up? How can people find you if they'd like to know more about you?
Yeah, the place to find me is Mary Case Energetics. So www.marykcaseenergetics.com is my Kajabi website. And you can click on for a free download, which says The Art of Nonverbal Communication, which has some more information about what we talked about. And it also has classes and upcoming. Actually, this afternoon at 2:00 Eastern Standard Time, I have like a little mini telecall on neurodivergent kids. So there's lots happening in X-Men classes and all kinds of little nuggets. Or Facebook. If you're a Facebook person, you know, Mary Case Energetics on Facebook, or And there's lots of also great resources available. The XMen resources, there's an XMen page on Facebook.
Mm. Well, Christina says, now I want to take an XMen class. And I'm like,
Cool. How's it
you
get
guys
any
do,
better than that?
that's amazing. So yes, I
Yeah,
highly
and
recommend.
truly, and also feel free to, I'm very accessible. I make myself very available, so feel free to grab me in Messenger or through my website or whatever works for you. I'm always happy to chat and support.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. And thank you everyone for watching and listening today. We are so grateful. Have a wonderful day.